Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful Thursday. I decided not to go live yesterday to finish up this analysis. I needed a day to kind of catch up on some chores and household things. I made bread, getting through my week. But today I am pretty positive that we are going to finish the September newsroom analysis. We have about a dozen articles to get through today, and that should conclude the September newsroom analysis, which, if you missed it, there are two other previous parts to this. There were just so many headlines from the month of September that I wanted to present. I didn't want to skip them. And so it was either break it up into multiple days or stream for like 6 hours straight, and I wasn't going to do that. So we are back today to finish up this last segment of the September newsroom analysis. If you have never made it to one of my live streams before, this is basically something where I sit down at the beginning of a new month. I pull up headlines from the previous month that are relevant to my particular research niche, and we talk about them. I present them, I read them out to you guys, I share my thoughts on them, and then if you are so inclined, you can share yours in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this after the live has ended. If you want to read any of these articles for yourself, like I always say, they are linked down below in the live stream description in a source document, and you can read through all of those in your own time. But I am looking forward to getting back into this today. I'll go ahead and get my browser pulled up here, just because we have some more interesting articles. Like I said, September was just such an interesting month news-wise, and there were a number of things that I didn't want to skip out on. I'm going to try to drink my coffee before it gets cold, which would be really nice. Alrighty, so I'll go ahead and jump into this first article while people are kind of coming in and everything. Feel free to sound off in the chat. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Let me know where you are tuning in from if you would like to. I always think it's really fun. We've had people tune in from all over the world, from Germany and Poland and Australia, and of course the UK, the United States, Canada. It's been so cool to connect with people from all over the world, and I sincerely appreciate everybody who does tune in for these live streams or who watches them back after the fact, and for sharing your thoughts and everything. A lot of the topics that I cover are heavy because I'm looking at topics related to human rights and human rights abuses. So it can be very heavy, but knowing that I'm not the only one reading through this stuff, knowing that I'm not the only one that cares, does sincerely help a lot in just lightening the mental load of learning all of this information. I don't think that it should be on any one person to grapple with, understand, and then find solutions for the challenges that we face in our world. I think it's up to each and every one of us, and it has to start within ourselves first so that, we can work to create the world that we want to live in. And so knowing that I'm not the only person out there who is trying to do that is very galvanizing. So thank you. And with that said, I'll get off my soapbox and we'll just go ahead and get into these articles. So this was published on the 24th of September, towards the end of the month of September. The headline is Opus Dei in Spain, Influential and Controversial. I'm not exactly sure what country it says in Spange NL. I'm not exactly sure what country this news article is from, but I did translate it. So if the translation isn't perfect, sometimes the browser messes those things up. I'll do my best to paraphrase things. So it begins, the ultra-conservative Opus Dei in Spain is often described as more Catholic than the Pope. This is something I've heard, yes. Opus Dei prefers to present itself as a group of servants of God. Although Opus Dei operates worldwide, Spain has by far the most members. And that makes sense. And this is going to give us a little bit of a history lesson about Opus Dei as well, which will be good if this is your first time tuning in, or if you still are kind of trying to wrap your brain around what Opus Dei is. This will kind of give you some of the groundwork, which is good because Opus Dei started out in Spain. So For nearly a century, the movement in Spain has been closely intertwined with the church, politics, and the social elite. This makes Opus Dei both influential and controversial in Spain. Officially, the organization emphasizes its lack of political or economic goals, but in practice, this appears to be much more complex. In Spain, where the movement originated, Opus Dei continues to play a visible role in both social and religious life. How has Opus Dei become so influential and so large in Spain? Opus Dei, Latin for Work of God, was founded in 1928 by the Spanish priest Jose Maria Escriva. He proclaimed that ordinary believers could become saints through their daily work, family, and social life. In 1982, John Paul II granted Opus Dei the status of a personal prelature. This meant that its members, both lay and priestly, do not belong to a diocese, but directly to the prelate who is appointed by the Pope. Opus Dei currently has approximately 93,000 members worldwide, of whom approximately 41,500 live in Spain. These figures are hotly contested by people who have left the organization in recent years. They all think that these figures are inflated. The majority lead ordinary professional lives, preferably raise a family, and contribute financially to the prelature, right? So that's all that they're saying, the quiet part out loud. This is what it's all about: leading a professional life, preferably raising a family, preferably a large family, and preferably you will write Opus Dei into your will as an additional child in your family so that it can benefit from the largesse that you will ostensibly be acquiring by leading your professional life. Approximately 20% of the members are celibate and devote themselves entirely to the activities and spiritual formation within the organization. There are different membership types within Opus Dei. You have within the organization, like immediately, those who like live in the centers and the facilities that Opus Dei runs. You have the numeraries and the numerary assistants. The numeraries are kind of what you could consider higher ranking members, especially when compared to the assistant numeraries. Numeraries live in the centers. Sometimes they have professional lives. Sometimes they have jobs out in the community, but they are celibate. They don't get married, don't have families. The assistant numeraries, which we have been discussing at length for a number of years now, are what you could consider the lower class members. And that's not my opinion. That just seems to be from what I have read, from what I've heard, from what I understand, that seems to be how the organization perceives assistant numeraries, though of course they would never say that. That's just kind of like the implications when you look at the way this organization has treated so many of these assistant numeraries. But they are responsible for cleaning and maintaining the centers and the houses, and for making the meals and doing the laundry and wiping the asses of the people who live in these centers. They wait on these people hand and foot. And then outside of the centers, you have a membership type called supernumerary. These people can get married, can live out in the world, can have families. It's preferable that they do have large families, so that, you know, one or two children can hopefully become Opus Dei priests, and one or two children can become Opus Dei numeraries, and then maybe one or two of them can become supernumeraries and keep having those babies, blah, 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 blah. And then there are a couple of other like tertiary membership types. There you can be an associate, I think is the term, and you can be a cooperator. And the thing with cooperators, I think that's the right term. You can Google all of this, fact check me, please. But I'm 99.9% sure it's called a cooperator. And these people, everybody else, you know, is expected to be Catholic and Opus Dei. But with the cooperators, you don't have to be Catholic. You don't have to be in a religion at all, technically. And by contributing like financially to the organization, you can take advantage of indulgences and prayers and certain things. I read about it all at one point a number of years ago, and kind of came away from it wondering why anybody would want to be a cooperator, unless it was purely just to be, just to like have access to the clout, essentially, that could hypothetically come from being a part of the organization. I don't know. But there are all these different membership types, is my point. So, Opus Dei's real breakthrough in Spain came during the regime of dictator Francisco Franco. Although the prelature itself maintained its political segregation, many members managed to secure influential positions in government during those years. A well known example is Spanish minister Laureano Lopez Rodo, who played a key role in the economic reforms of the 1960s. This group of highly educated administrators and academics became known as the technocrats. Many of them had been formed within Opus Dei and contributed significantly to the modernization of Spain. The close ties to the Franco regime gave the movement a strong power base. This also ensured that Opus Dei became deeply rooted in the church and society in Spain. Years later, Opus Dei gained even greater recognition outside of the church world. This was due to the immensely popular book and the 2006 film, The Da Vinci Code. Although this was fiction, the image of an organization that evokes both dedication and controversy remained. I would also add dedication, fanaticism, and controversy. Today, Opus Dei is considered one of the most influential institutions within the Catholic Church. The prelature has laid a strong foundation, particularly in Spain. One of its pillars is the extensive and robust educational empire Opus Dei has built in Spain, which extends from kindergartens to universities. With a total of 90 schools and 3 universities, Opus Dei is part of the largest private educational network in the country. The program, from early childhood education to postgraduate programs, attracts thousands of students annually. The program is known for its focus on academic excellence and a strong foundation in Christian values. This allows the movement to attract families who are not members of Opus Dei, as non-members are also welcome. This educational structure not only generates millions, furthermore, the prelature has a scholarship system that also allows students from less affluent families to participate. This reinforces its image of social engagement and openness. And I will say, from what I have read, from what I understand, from what I've gleaned, religion, Catholicism specifically, is so much more entrenched in like Spanish and Latin American life than it is here in the United States. I mean, people often make the case, and it's a decently good one, for the fact that this is like a very Christian nation. Obviously, right now we're living through this like kind of Christian nationalist thing. So that is a factor here in the United States. But in Spain, it's the Catholic Church all the way through and through. And that is still like very much a part of like the separation of church and state. It's not really a thing in Spain and in Latin America, particularly when you take into consideration the outsized impact that an organization like Opus Dei has managed to make and have on the country since its inception back in the late 1920s. So I wanted to throw that in there because that is something that I read and see and hear very, very often. Just the idea that like religion is just so much more a part of everyday life. Like it just is. And I think that can be kind of interesting to think about and kind of challenging to frame if you are an American who has grown up in kind of a more like middle of the road, moderate political environment. You know, if you weren't raised on one of the two extremes, then that can kind of be like a strange concept to wrap your mind around, the degree to which religion absolutely does hold sway over these societies, but it's very real. So it continues. At the same time, criticism is being voiced. Opponents argue that this educational network is not only intended to educate, but also to exert ideological influence on new generations. Which, yeah, duh. I mean, Opus Dei has more or less out and out said that is their plan, right? I mean, that was Jose Maria Escriva's entire shtick to encourage the members to insert themselves into nearly every strata of society. Opus Dei, on the other hand, maintains that its goal to provide an education that promotes both the academic and personal development of students. In recent years, a growing number of former members have shared their stories both through the press and in personal testimonies. They paint a picture of strict rules, rituals, and a life completely dedicated to the organization. Within Opus Dei, there are several groups of members. Oh, perfect. They get into it. Numeraries, men or women who live celibate lives, dedicate their lives entirely to the apostolic activities and spiritual formation of the prelature. They are considered chosen and privileged. They have professional life, live in special Opus Dei houses, and contribute a portion of their income to the organization. women. Then there are the auxiliary members, which I think they mean like the assistant numeraries, exclusively women who dedicate themselves specifically to domestic tasks within the centers, primarily for male members. And I don't know exactly why, so maybe somebody can explain this, why there is like the two terms are used interchangeably. You'll have auxiliary numeraries or assistant numeraries is how you'll hear them referred to both ways, or like in the online vernacular, you'll often see them referred to as just NAX, N-A-X. So that's kind of interesting, but all three terms are referring to the same category of all women servants, basically, that Opus Dei maintains. Behind the doors of these residences, various stories circulate. A well-known tradition within Opus Dei is El Minuto Heroico. The numeraria is required to get up immediately upon hearing the alarm, without delay, as a daily act of discipline and obedience to God. And I don't believe it's not just the numeraries that do this. It's everybody. I think everybody's supposed to. That at least I know that I have heard that former assistant numeraries also did this. I don't know if that's like widely practiced, but I would be surprised if it wasn't, just because when it comes to this type of thing, everything in Opus Dei is very kind of like regimented and militaristic. Like everybody follows the same playbook. So critics consider this a form of behavior control. According to testimonies, Opus Dei still uses the Silis, the Catholic penitential belt with metal spikes. This belt had to be worn for 2 hours daily. Members were also encouraged, or longer, not just 2 hours. This gets extrapolated upon and editorialized, the rules for how you're supposed to use this Silis and the discipline, which is that rope whip that they use. They will take liberties with that, and if for some reason a person feels like they really need to punish themselves, you best better believe that this does absolutely get taken to extremes. And you can read stories about that on Opus Libris, Opus Dei Exposed, inside Pick, a book. Now we're having multiple books that have been written within the last few years about people's lives in Opus Dei. It gets taken to extremes, and I think there's a really interesting and self-harm. And I don't see those conversations being had, and I think that's really, really, really concerning. Really concerning. From a psychological perspective, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I don't have a background in mental health, but, I'm not an idiot, and I've spent plenty of time in therapy myself and talking about these things, and like what that does to a person's brain, being exposed to that kind of environment, being forced to being encouraged, maybe is a better term to use, to punish yourself for literally just being a normal human being. Mentally, what that does to a person, the degree of upset that can cause is, I think, really, really significant. And I've not really seen that discussed much. Testimonies from former members also emerged from countries like Argentina and Paraguay. They describe how Opus Dei recruited them as young girls from rural areas and placed them in boarding schools or residences. There, they were required to perform free domestic work and live under strict supervision. The organization often forbade them from contact with their families. The women describe how Opus Dei completely undermined their identity, family ties, and freedom. Later, they often suffered physical ailments as a result, such as a broken back or panic attacks. A spokesperson for Opus Dei Argentina denied the accusations of human trafficking and exploitation. However, he acknowledged in a statement, quote, Opus Dei is an organization of people and as such not free from errors. And they have the Spanish, El Opus Dei es una organización compuesta, blah, 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 blah. Okay. A Spanish psychologist who has been treating former members of Opus Dei for 15 years indicates that many former members also struggle with feelings of guilt and anxiety disorders. They also often struggle to reshape their own identity after leaving the movement. Oh, so this article must be coming from the Netherlands, because it says Opus Dei in the Netherlands at the end here. And it says, although most stories originate from Spain and Latin America, Opus Dei is also active in the Netherlands. The movement is smaller here, however. Primarily in the larger cities, Opus Dei organizes spiritual guidance, reflection meetings, and courses for those who want to grow in faith and apostasy. These numbers, when Opus Dei has stated previously multiple times that they don't keep records, allegedly. They don't keep records of members, like who is a member and who isn't. And also they don't require members themselves to disclose if they are or are not in the organization. So how in the world do you expect me to take these figures seriously when you've already said that you're not trying to do that and you don't do that? Is anyone's guess, honestly, in my opinion. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But there you go. Hi, Justin. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, I've got my family in the background. I've got all three are back there, although I think you can only see kind of two of them right now. But this is a good time of the day to do it because they've had their breakfast and they've had their little potty time outside and everything. And it's still too cold to be outside for them to like want to be outside. It's pretty cold this morning, so they're perfectly comfortable to just like lay in bed and take their mid-morning snooze while I do this. So I'm like capitalizing on the fact that like this is their downtime. It is very much like having three like perma toddlers. Obviously you can like leave them on their own for short periods of time and they'll be fine. You can leave them like in your vehicle if you need to run into a store, and like they're gonna be fine as long as it's not too hot or too cold or whatever. You can leave them and they'll be happy to see you when you come back, all that. But it is a big responsibility all of the same. Like it's three lives back behind me who have very distinct personalities and very distinct wants and needs, and have their own personality quirks and foibles. And I mean, I never feel alone, and it's really, really interesting, the relationship that you can develop with an animal when you live in such close quarters with them and you're with them all of the time, which I pretty much am. I'm with my dogs more than I think most people are because I don't have a job that I go away to and then come home every day and all that. They go with me everywhere I go. So like they feel at this point like an extension of myself, and I rely on them for companionship and emotional support. You better believe emotional support. They are amazing for that, but they're also like three additional sets of eyes and ears and three more noses, and like they're very good at letting me know if there's something they're noticing that seems kind of weird, or if somebody's coming up. They're very good about letting me know that. Like I'm well protected. I'm very well protected, and I'm so thankful for them. All right. Anyway, that was a sidebar. I could talk about my dogs for a really long time. This is from the Calgary Herald. This was published September 25th. Calgary priest convicted of sexual assault exploitation. So, a Roman Catholic priest who ministered to a Calgary parish last year has been convicted of sexual assault and sexual exploitation in Ontario. Reverend John Gannon was found guilty on Monday in the Ontario Court of Justice for offenses committed in Cornwall, Ontario in 2007 and 2008 at the Legionaries of Christ Novitiate and Apostolic School. He's been pastor at Ascension Parish in Calgary since the summer of 2022 until he was placed on administrative leave and prohibited from exercising his priestly duties after being charged in early 2024. Before that, he'd been posted to the downtown Sacred Heart Parish for 6 years. Gannon had been a member of the Catholic missionary congregation known as the Legionaries of Christ, which issued a statement following his conviction, noting that the priest maintains his innocence and plans to appeal the conviction. Quote, "The Legionaries of Christ respect the decision of the court and the legal process," the statement said. "We recognize the courage it takes for someone to come forward with a report of abuse and participate in legal processes. Our prayers for healing are with the individual who brought this case forward, and we apologize profoundly and sincerely to them for what they suffered and for the pain it has caused." The Legionaries said they're committed to helping victims and encouraged anyone who'd suffered abuse to come forward. "We affirm our commitment to truth, accountability, transparency, and justice, asking our Lord to strengthen and guide us as we examine our work for ways that we can continue to improve our protection of minors and vulnerable adults," the statement said. No date has been set for Gannon's sentencing. In a September 2022 introductory letter to parishioners at Ascension Park, Gannon urged them to resume practicing their faith following the COVID-19 pandemic that had kept them physically apart. Quote, "While the last couple of years have had their challenges, I am excited to see how the Lord will lead us going forward," end quote. Womp womp. Looks like the Lord's going to be leading you right into a prison cell, buddy. Not yesterday, 2 days ago, when I did the part 2 stream, I talked about an article that I had found or seen that had come up that was talking about this like safety protocol measures that the legionaries. So this is an interesting article. This is from the Washington Examiner. And let me scroll through here. It's a little lengthy, but it's basically a book review about Dan Brown's conspiracy of, they have it spelled Cuccess, so it's like success, but with a C at the beginning of it. So is it supposed to be like cuccess? I don't know if that's a typo or what's going on there, but it was published September 26th. And I want to read what they have to say specifically about the Da Vinci Code, the book, the Da Vinci Code, and the movie and everything, just because, for better or for worse, it did launch Opus Dei into like the public awareness, just because of how outlandish the depiction of Opus Dei was in the film, and I guess in the book as well, to a lesser extent, just because the film's visual, so it's going to pack a little bit more of a punch than a book will. But I mean, the book itself was so incredibly controversial. I can remember growing up listening to like people on Catholic Answers or whatever on EWTN just railing against this book for its like blasphemy and its irreverence and everything. And little did I know that just a few short years later, as the preponderance of evidence piled up against him. And why not? Fact or not, the Da Vinci Code was a global sensation. By 2016, the book had moved more than 80 million copies and had become one of the best-selling novels in American history. The book touched a nerve. In 2003, the United States was going through a minor religious revival. George W. Bush was president, and a very popular one, and the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001 had filled the nation with a pervasive sense of moral righteousness that had not yet been deflated by the debacle of the Iraq War and the Great Recession. Brown's novel made a mockery of those attitudes, and his inflammatory alternative to the greatest story ever told proved impossible to ignore. It helped him that the organization at the heart of the Da Vinci Code's conspiracy, Opus Dei, is a real Catholic group, some of whose members hold positions of power within the church as well as in academia, the banks, and world governments. Opus Dei does not, however, possess any untold secrets about Jesus. It didn't take long for what was already in print a print sensation to become a hot topic on the internet, when then a new technology where the fictional conspiracy was often treated as documentary fact. The Da Vinci Code earned Brown lasting notoriety. Robert Langdon is by now an institution, the subject of 6 novels and 3 film adaptations starring Tom Hanks. The latest of the novels, The Secret of Secrets, was published this month to the usual fanfare. Wall-to-wall newspaper advertisings in all major dailies, massive pyramid displays in Barnes & Noble, and floor-to-ceiling banners in airport concourses. The initial print run exceeded 1 million copies, and Brown's publisher, Doubleday, withheld advanced copies from reviewers. Better to keep the secret safe. Okay, so they're just going to continue to talk about his books and things that he's written and the impact that they've had. They say here at the end he's not too worried about AI replacing them. Yeah, I mostly just wanted to read what I had to say about the Da Vinci Code, Opus Dei, and like that time and period in history when the book came out, because I do think it's all very interesting when you take it all kind of in with its full context. Alrighty. So we're about to talk about somebody who has been making appearances semi-consistently. We're going to be talking about the Lima Mayor, Aliaga, who I think I mentioned during both of my previous 2 portions of this stream. So this was published September 22nd. It says, Lima Mayor ousted from front row seat at papal audience. In what has been dubbed an unprecedented move, last week, Lima Mayor Rafael Lopez Aliaga at the last minute was denied front row tickets to a papal audience and the photo with the Pope that came with it. Aliaga, mayor of Lima since 2023, is also leader of the conservative Popular Renewal Party and is a candidate in Peru's presidential and congressional elections to be held April 12th. He was present in Rome last week and, according to sources with knowledge of the situation, initially asked to have a private audience with the Pope, for which he would be accompanied by Javier Cipriani, brother of Cardinal Juan Luis Cipriani, who was punished by Pope Francis over allegations that he sexually abused a minor in confession. The private audience was denied, however. Aliaga was given special Baccia Mano tickets, meaning front row tickets, which come with a papal photo and handshake, for Leo's September 17th public general audience. News of Aliaga's visit to Rome and his front row tickets caused widespread backlash among victims of clerical abuse due to his association with a Peru-based lay group suppressed by Pope Francis, the Sodalitium Christianae Vitae, SCV, as well as the presence of Cardinal Cipriani's brother. Yeah, it's like they're all thick as thieves together. It's really interesting. Victims wrote to several Vatican officials as well as the popes to the Pope to voice their concern. Critics also took issue over the fact that Aliaga, who is a presidential candidate in Peru's upcoming general election, will get a photo op that could be manipulated for political ends, as well as recent comments he made saying a journalist should be killed. In the wake of the backlash, the status of Aliaga's tickets were changed at the last minute, and instead of getting the Baccia Mano tickets when he picked up his envelope, he had been given Repartic ticket status after being guaranteed front row seats is extremely rare, if not unprecedented, and demonstrates the complexities that surround the church-state relationship in Peru, especially with a pope who holds Peruvian citizenship and is therefore eligible to vote in Peru's elections. To change a politician's ticket status after being guaranteed front row seats is extremely rare, if not unprecedented, and demonstrates the complexities that surround the church-state relationship in Peru. I don't know why that sentence bugs me, but it does. Maybe it's because this just seems so trite to me in the grand scheme of things. The fact that Aliaga lost his front row tickets and that made a news headline. It seems very trite. And also it's like the people know nothing about what's happening in the church, decisions that are going to be made by the Pope or by the Vatican, whatever. So there is nothing left but to speculate and to take things like this, really like trite, goofy political games, in my opinion, and like run with it, because what else do you have? In the past, Aliaga has been open about his friendship and admiration of former SCV member Father James Bertol, who was expelled from the group prior to its suppression over allegations of financial corruption and sexual abuse, and who is widely considered to be the mastermind of the SCV's money-making scheme, which has come under scrutiny for alleged tax fraud and international money laundering. Among other things, the SCV has been accused of tax fraud by designating 9 large cemeteries in Peru as tax-exempt mission territories managed by the SCV-run St. John the Baptist Civil Association, and sending the many millions of dollars in profits to holding companies abroad. What does that sound like? With the Vatican pressuring the now extinct SCV to turn over significant funds for the reparation of its victims, the ACSJB, according to Peruvian investigative journalist Paola Ugaz, has transferred the money to a trust in an investment firm run by Aliaga, Acres Sociedad Titulizadora, S.A. And addressed to Pope Leo ahead of Aliaga's visit to the Vatican, Jose Enrique Escardo, the first person to denounce abuses within the SCV and president of the Survivors Network of Peru, lamented that the mayor had publicly manifested support for the SCV and accused members such as Bertol. Quote, further, it is commonly known that he does business with them, he said, specifically mentioning the Acres investment company founded by Aliaga, which he said holds 36 businesses that either belong or used to belong to the SCV. So this is getting very complicated and weird very, very quickly, which is why, even though this SCV organization technically doesn't exist anymore, it's still like very much around because of all of these businesses and properties and things that this organization acquired. Escardo said that Aliaga for years attacked victims and survivors, politicians, journalists, and other investigators of the SCV in the media and on social networks in an effort to discredit their claims. Aliaga and his inner circle, he said, are responsible for the smear campaigns against those of us who have denounced the Soda Lithium's abuses, as well as the judicial persecution of journalists who have investigated them. And this is true. The lengths that were taken to suppress the truth and to attempt to dissuade the journalists from doing their job were really beyond the pale, honestly. We ask that you continue your policy of not accepting the mistreatment of victims of ecclesial violence and your defense of the press that denounces it, and that you not receive this person who has become one of the Soda Lithium's main political facilitators and one of the main attackers of victims and survivors, he said. Victims also criticized Aliaga's apparent intention to bring Javier Cipriani with him to the papal audience, given the controversy surrounding the allegations against his brother, Cardinal Juan Luis Cipriani, whose ministry was restricted by Pope Francis in 2019 over allegations of abuse, and who caused uproar ahead of this year's conclave by disregarding those restrictions and participating in the pre-conclave meetings anyway. Yep. And I believe this was published before Cipriani got his private audience with the Pope, which is something that has since happened. And I talked about that in the second part of this stream, and I clipped that section and uploaded it as a regular video. So if you want to hear my raw, unfiltered opinion of Pope Leo and this entire situation, you can go and read that there. But suffice it to say, I am not impressed by any of this. Aliaga faced criticism for comments made during a public speech earlier this month, saying journalist Gustavo Goretti, president of the IDL Reporteros, a group of investigative journalists, be gotten rid of for good, which was interpreted by them as a death threat. In response, the president of the National Association of Journalists in Peru said the remark amounted to an act to incite violence and said it ought to be condemned. Similarly, the National Association of Journalists in Peru also wrote letters to Pope Leo, to Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and to Italian Sister Simona Brambilla, ahead of the Vatican's Dicastery for Religious, asking that the Pope be protected from the obvious failure to properly vet Aliaga before granting him the tickets. It's like, who's running the show over there? And how is it it seems possible, if not outright likely, that things are happening and the Pope is just completely oblivious to it, has no idea. That's kind of like the implication here. Or he does know and he doesn't care, unless it creates some type of a stink that could become a media frenzy in some way, maybe. It's just my opinion, my thoughts. All right, moving right along. This was published September 26th from Dublin. The headline says, "Study into Sexual Abuse of Women Religious Sheds Light on Spiritual Abuse." I thought this was fantastic. The first research study into the sexual abuse of women religious in German-speaking countries has shown a common pattern of spiritual abuse with global cases and highlighted that the majority of abuse is perpetrated by men, although some sisters were abused also by women superiors. Women do commit violent crimes. Women absolutely can prey on people just as well as men can. That's a untrue stereotype that men are the only ones who do this kind of thing, although I do think it leans heavily more male than female, but women can too. But all of that said, all couching of my, it's crazy to me that you would ever just assume that priests are harmless. Why? Because it's crazy to me that you would ever just assume that a man, just some man that you don't know very well, maybe you don't even know him from Adam, is harmless. I would never assume that a person is harmless. I also would never assume that a person is trustworthy just because they happen to be in a position of some sort does not mean that I am going to completely lay aside my critical thinking skills and my survival instincts in the situation. And it seems like that is definitely the like expected attitude for someone to have, is the assumption that priests are harmless, and that this is like it is absolutely an enabling factor in whether or not somebody is able to like target and abuse a person. Oh, they're harmless. They're great. Everyone loves them. He's never done anything to me, you know? The research shows that the median age of victims when the abuse began was 28. 9 of the women have since left the religious communities they were members of, while 6 continue to live as women religious. The abusers were identified as 12 men, of whom 10 were fathers and brothers of a religious community, and 2 were diocesan priests. The 3 other abusers were fellow sisters. The research showed that there was a large age gap between victims and their abusers in most cases. Power imbalance. 8 of the perpetrators were 17 to 35 years older. 8 of the perpetrators were 17 to 35 years older. 4 of the perpetrators were 10 to 15 years older, and 3 of the perpetrators were less than 10 years older. So you're skewing significantly older. And why might that be? Maybe because it's easier to take advantage of somebody who is much younger, who doesn't know as much about the world as you do, who doesn't have the same context and frame of reference as you do. The research has shown that abuse of power is strictly connected to physical abuse. The perpetrators were spiritual directors and novitiate directors, superiors who were both male and female, retreat leaders, and fellow sisters with authority. The difference in status offered specific opportunities to groom. The forms of abuse included sexualized violence and lasted in most cases between 7 and 16 years. The study has shown that abuse can affect all women religious, and that these are factors that make them particularly vulnerable. Victims identified abuse as minors as increasing their vulnerability. Treating sexuality as a taboo also made the victims more vulnerable. For some victims, it was difficult to recognize the abuse as such, as abuse in their spiritual sphere weakens women's self-esteem. So they're laying out all throughout here how like these abuses end up being perpetrated on people. There are all of these different like factors that impact their ability to be empowered in these situations. The study also found that perpetrators use their role and power to groom and legitimize the abuse, and so abuse is often spiritually underpinned. Asked if any of the women interviewed for the study had experienced spiritual abuse similar to that experienced by alleged victims of Slovenian theologian and artist Father Marko Rupnik, Hasselbeck said yes. The women I interviewed also report similar patterns, such as spiritual grooming for sexual abuse, the mixing of spirit. The perpetrators are always superiors and have authority, said the theologian, whose research focuses on spiritual abuse, spirituality after abuse, and sexual abuse among Catholic women religious. Give this stream a thumbs up and share it, because with this topic of conversation, I can guarantee you that this video is not going to be eligible. The stream's not going to be eligible for full monetization. But these are really important topics that we need to talk about. We need to be able to talk about them with our full chests. And so give the stream a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate it, because this is definitely not going to make the YouTube gods happy. But fuck it. What is surprising? Oh yeah, sexual abuse of nuns by nuns. The publication of the new research study follows Hasselbeck's address to the Congress of the European Society for Catholic Theology, which was hosted by Loyola Institute at Trinity College in Dublin in August. In her Dublin talk on specific patterns of spiritual abuse, she highlighted that just as there is a violation of sexual autonomy or self-determination, there is a violation of spiritual autonomy. Based on the testimonies of victims, Hasselbeck identified 3 main patterns that victims repeatedly describe in this type of abuse. They are love bombing and dependence, pressure to perform and submit, and thought reform. So let me read that one more time. Based on the testimonies of the victims, Hasselbeck identified 3 main patterns that victims repeatedly describe in this type of abuse. They are love bombing and dependence, pressure to perform and submit, and thought reform. Love bombing refers to manipulative and abusive tactics where an individual showers another with excessive displays of affection and attention to gain control and accelerate a relationship. She told the Theology Congress that victims of spiritual abuse often suffer breakdown, isolation, and alienation from both themselves and God. Many cannot find support. It is risky, it is dangerous to talk about spiritual abuse, Hasselbeck said. It should not be dangerous. The only people that conversations of this nature should be dangerous towards are the people who are perpetrating the abuse. But people apparently can't even have these conversations within these religious contexts without people shutting down and getting defensive. And I think that fact alone indicates the extent of the brainwashing and thought control that religion and religious organizations can exert over people, masses of people. There are way more of us. Castro, who is definitively sentenced to 11 years and 6 months in prison for sexual violence. So they said the initial sentence was 13 years and 6 months. Somehow, it got reduced to 11 years and 6 months. That's great. Sentence for the priest accused of molesting 17 minors and his former parish has thus become definitive. The investigation opened in 2010 following complaints filed by the children's parents. Don Roberto Mastro had joined the parish in 2007 and founded a scout group which attracted many members. After the initial reports, several others were added. The investigation was conducted by the Carabinieri, who interviewed dozens of witnesses, including minors, who the judicial authorities requested to be heard under the form of an evidentiary hearing, and with the presence of experts who deemed the children's statements reliable. They spoke of abuse by Don Roberto up until December 11th, 2010, before the priest left town during the night. In the first instance, Mastro was sentenced to 13 years and 6 months by the Collegiate Court of Catanzaro. The sentence was revised on appeal to 11 years and 6 months. The sentence was sealed by the Supreme Court of Cassation, which will result in the prelate being sent to prison. The civil parties were defended by lawyers Vincenzo Ranieri and Matteo. Okay, there's a bunch of names that I'm definitely going to butcher if I try to pronounce them all, but these were the names of the lawyers who defended the parties. And I'm assuming this is him right here. It's like a tale as old as time. And is this next article about the same? No, this is about Opus Dei. All right. So we will move on from this right here. This is 17 children. That is a lot of children. And he only got 11 years and some months. That is just honestly sad. That's under the jail type behavior. That's under the jail type behavior. Do you know what I mean? And all he got was 11 years for irreparably damaging the lives of at least 17 children, but probably more. Just because even if he himself did not actually lay hands on another victim, this type of thing, I said this the other day and I'm going to keep saying it, it sends out ripples throughout society. It sends out ripples throughout the lives of all of the people who these children will go on to interact with. It absolutely does. It leaves a wake of trauma and pain that can go on for generations. And I don't think that the full weight of what that means is appreciated by the legal system at all. Do you think that 11 years is an appropriate amount of time? Does that actually reflect the seriousness, the impact of what this individual did, not to just one child, but 17? What that's going to do to their lives? 11 years, you think that's good? I don't think that. So this is from bishopaccountability.org, September 26th. Originally came out of Spain. Former Opus Dei numerary's memoir claims abuse and trafficking. This is the headline's a bit of a typo because they're talking about Anne Marie Allen's new book, Serve, which I have in my stack behind me and is amazing. You absolutely should go and find it and read it if you can. She was an assistant numerary, not a numerary. So the headline, if they read it, you really, really, really should. I got to interview her, and that interview will be going up at some point before the end of the year. It was absolutely amazing. So definitely recommend finding that book through interlibrary loan or your secondhand bookseller of choice or Amazon or whatever you like to use, because her story deserves to be amplified and heard, and she deserves to be supported for having the courage to tell it so plainly and so without mincing words or anything. Anyway, the article says an ex-assistant numerary, Anne Marie Allen, held the lowest rank of Opus Dei's hierarchical structure, where she spent almost 7 years with the conservative Catholic group in Ireland, starting when she was 15. Quote, "I think it is the voice of the weakest that will bring Opus Dei down," Allen says, matter-of-factly. In Serve, My Lost Years at the Heart of Opus Dei, the 62-year-old documents the domestic servitude which she and other Irish women say they were lured into with the promise of vocational training. Her criticism of Opus Dei, including that the promised training never materialized, echoes that of other ex-numerary assistants around the world, including in Argentina, where a criminal investigation involves 43 former members who say they were trafficked and exploited. Opus Dei is a conservative and notoriously secretive Catholic group founded in 1928 in Spain. Dogged by controversy from the beginning, the group's stated aim is to help lay and clerical members sanctify their daily lives. While this mission has resonated with a post-Vatican II church, critics say Opus Dei seeks to influence the powerful and wealthy in order to increase its own access to the levers of power within both the church and society. This blending of faith and political lobbying has been particularly strong in the United States and Spain. Assistant numeraries, Opus Dei's lowest rank, are women who primarily attend the domestic needs, including cooking and cleaning, of the organization's centers. The women live and work under obedience to Opus Dei and commit to celibacy and sanctifying their lives to 70 countries, though exact figures are elusive due to the group's discretion or secrecy, depending on your viewpoint. I appreciate the fact that they threw that in there. John Paul II canonized Escriva as a saint in 2002. Ex-numerary assistants who belonged to Opus Dei in the 70s, 80s, and 90s have claimed that they were forced to work up to 12 hours a day cooking and cleaning for elite members without pay. This allegation has reoccurred in Ireland, Peru, and Spain, and Mexico. Let's not forget Mexico, too. And was the subject of the Financial Times 2024 special investigation into 16 former assistant numeraries, including Allen. Allen's book is believed to be the first English-language account of the harsh conditions endured by assistant numeraries. This first-hand account also exposes Opus Dei's recruiting methodologies. Many of the girls, only females could join this lowly rank, were under 18 when recruited and committed to Opus Dei without their parents' knowledge or consent. Quote, "I was 17 at this stage, a kid even in those days, not able to make my own choices," Allen tells NCR. Opus Dei never something, it cuts off her quote. Every aspect of the girls' lives was controlled. Letters and phone calls were censored. Everything revolved around domestic work, prayer, and self-mortification with Assilis and the discipline. In hindsight, Allen believes that part of the way Opus Dei managed to control the assistant numeraries was through their demanding work schedule. "There was no time to think in the organization," she says. "I was just another drone. I plotted through every week, every day, each day a replica of the one before." When serving the male numeraries their food, the girls wore black dresses, black hairbands, white aprons, white cuffs, and white collars. I don't remember turning 17, 18, 19, or 20, but I remember going between centers in Ireland to do the same monotonous duties 7 days a week for years, Alan says. It was 7 days a week, morning until night, silently cleaning for no pay, trafficked, enslaved, and unhappy. So, Opus Dei, in response to former assistant numeraries speaking out, they've published and released a few things over the years, ostensibly coming from the assistant numerary faction within Opus Dei, that was intended to, in essence, refute everything that Anne Maria said, particularly in regard to just the overall environment that is inculcated within Opus Dei, particularly for assistant numeraries. And they released a letter at one point that was signed, quote unquote, by however many hundreds or thousands of assistant numeraries, basically stating that they love their work and it's so fulfilling and they enjoy it so much. And it's sad that some bad things have happened to some people in some places, but we're having a great time, and we really don't appreciate the fact that people are trying to bring attention to this situation. That's more or less the tone of this letter. And that's all well and good, and I am sure that there are people, including assistant numeraries in Opus Dei, who are genuinely enjoying their experience, feel like they are living out something true and holy, feel like they are living out a God-given vocation, yada yada yada. Like, I'm definitely not denying that is a fact, but let's just remember what Anne Marie said. I don't remember turning 17, 18, 19, or 20, but I remember going between centers in Ireland to do the same monotonous duties 7 days a week for years. It was 7 days a week, morning until night, silently cleaning for no pay, trafficked, enslaved, and unhappy. So Opus Dei can flap their gums all they want about how happy people actually are within the organization, but I'm not inclined to believe them when I have this and everything else that has come out weighing the other side of the scales. And there needs to be some justice. Those scales need to be balanced in some way, and they are not. And these are real experiences that people are having. And okay, so what if it's maybe 13% of the, or 10% of the entire, this is hypothetical, but like, let's just say that the people who are having a bad experience, a negative experience, only constitutes 10 or 15% of the total body of like assistant numeraries or numeraries in Opus Dei. That's not a real figure, but let's just hypothetically say that was the case. And aside from those 10 to 15%, everybody else was having a great time. Everybody else is super happy to be there. Everybody else feels like they're living out their vocation. What about that 10 or 15%? What about the people who are coming out with physical ailments that they will be forced to deal with for the rest of their life, with the onset of illnesses that they should really never have acquired, the mental health aspect of it, the pain, the strain, the PTSD. I've asked people this question before and never gotten much of an answer. But how much human suffering is acceptable to you? Let's just say that it is. Let's say it's not even 10 or 15%. Let's say it's 1 or 2%. Do the 1 or 2% not matter? Do their experiences and their lives not have value because it's mostly great for everyone else? That's not fair. That's not just. That's fucked. And to say, oh, well, it's fine. We're doing God's work. We're following God's mission. This is what we have to do. To justify it all? To justify suffering? Hello. That's debauched. Truly. And Anne-Marie Allen is not the only person stating that she was essentially trafficked within Opus Dei. Assistant numeraries have alleged in Argentina and elsewhere that Opus Dei trafficked them. Google Opus Dei human trafficking. And then read what you find. I dare you. In Serve, Allen recalls attending the so-called 2-year course at Ballyglunin in County Galway when she was 16, while other girls in the course were being brought to Rome. I was told, you're to tell your parents you have won a scholarship to go to work in an exclusive center of Opus Dei and that this is a very unique opportunity, she says. So I wrote to my parents. I wasn't going to be home for Easter, nor was I going to Rome. In 1980, Opus Dei sent Allen to Dublin, where she worked from 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. at the Riversdale Center for the 10 days of Easter. The then 17-year-old was told to lie to her parents. The only reason I was there was because they needed free domestic labor, she says. So is that trafficking? I think it is. My parents were lied to. I was told to lie. Assistant numeraries were not paid, Allen says. We had to ask for everything, even small things. Everything was watched and counted, and if you had a special request, it had to be mulled over like you were asking for a loan of thousands, and usually denied. Even things like hair clips were major asks. Hair clips, socks, underwear, feminine hygiene, basic things that women need, they were not getting. Numeraries, on the other hand, had full wardrobes filled with lovely modern clothes. She says, I knew they did because I cleaned their bedrooms. Allen recalls how another assistant numerary introduced her to mortification of the flesh, a practice in which people deliberately hurt themselves as a sign of obedience and penance. She says the woman, Miss O'Rourke, gave her a small linen bag with a drawstring and a small tag. O'Rourke pulled out a small twisted rope like a thick plate that had come loose on one end. It looked like a horsewhip. This is for your mortifications, Allen recalls O'Rourke telling her. I stared at her. I knew what that word meant. She had told me before it was the reason she had no mattress. It was the reason I had cold showers, too. Inside the bag was a silis, a metal chain with metal spikes and a clasp holding it together. It looked like something you would put on an animal, Allen recalls. I'd seen something like that on the neck of a dog. The woman told her she would wear the silis on her leg for 2 hours a day. Allen complied. Opus Dei rejects the allegations of abuse and trafficking. Quote, the family is fundamental to Opus Dei, and not only does the prelature seek to involve families in the lives of its members, but also to care for their well-being spiritually and materially if necessary. UK spokesperson Jack Valero said in a January statement. Huh? In what world? In what world is Opus Dei going above and beyond to care for its members' well-being spiritually and materially if necessary? Does Opus Dei have some sort of like relief fund for Opus Dei members in case there's an emergency or something happens that they can like access? The military has something like this. It's like the Service Members Civil Relief Act. And it's something that you can take advantage of if you get into a situation where you're like upside down on your finances or there's a financial emergency or something like that happens. There are resources for service members. Are there resources like that for people in Opus Dei? Because I have not heard of it. If that is true, Opus Dei should like get that shit public sooner rather than later, because that would go a long way towards making it look like they give a shit. Jack Valero. Oh, Jack. Never have I ever seen a person so completely ensconced in their own cognitive dissonance. I've had interactions with Jack Valero, although I don't know that he knows it was me, but it was me. And the man, much like many other diehard Opus Dei fanatics, appears to my perception, from my point of view, appears to be completely unable to grapple with reality in any substantial way. Everything that comes out of his mouth is just Opus Dei line after Opus Dei line after obfuscation after distraction. Show me the money. Where is the proof that Opus Dei is caring for members' well-being spiritually and materially? Because what I've heard from former members, what I have read in these books that I'm reading, is that the entity being spiritually and materially tended to is Opus Dei. And it's being done by these members and these families that get involved, who are writing Opus Dei into their wills as an additional child, leaving properties and wealth, because that's the expectation. Where is the care? Show me. Valero said such accusations describe a lifestyle which does not accord with reality. And of course. They, assistant numeraries, receive remuneration for their work like any citizen and health benefits according to what each country can offer. Moreover, efforts are made, as in all Opus Dei centers, to ensure that the houses where members live and in some cases work provide a welcoming environment with facilities for rest, recreation, reading, and study. Okay. They may have a welcoming environment. It may look very welcoming, and there may be facilities for rest, recreation, reading, and study. But how are they actually are they actually being utilized? Do people actually have access to those things? Because I have heard very recently from a friend of mine that, let's take the Opus Dei shrine in Spain, whatever reason. Nobody's actually using the stuff. It's just there. And the assistant numeraries come through and polish and clean it until they are black and blue, but it's not actually being utilized. More efforts are made. By who? Efforts are made. Provide a welcoming environment. Who's doing that? Are they being paid? Prove it. Prove it. And then prove that these people who are doing all of this are also being given the opportunity to take advantage of everything that they supposedly have access to. This reminds me of like the Navy boot camp, for example. It's 3 months long. Whatever. And for those 3 months, you're treated as a subhuman, right? You're a recruit. You're not full sailor yet. You're just a grubby, grimy recruit. And you don't have any rights, and you get told when to sleep, and you get told when to eat, and you get told when to stand watch, and you get told if you can go to the restroom, the head, so on and so forth. And the expectation being that by the time those 3 months are concluded, you will have transformed from a civilian to a grubby recruit to a United States sailor. And then you go on and you do your job. That lasts for 3 months. During those 3 months, there are things at Great Lakes, which is the military base in Chicago. So they have this thing called Recruit Heaven, where it's basically like a big arcade. It's a big building with an arcade, pool tables, vending machines, computers with internet, so you can like get on and check your Facebook and stuff. And this was always dangled as like, hey, if you behave, you'll get to go to Recruit Heaven, and maybe we'll take you guys to Recruit Heaven. And if you didn't get to go, usually every single like group of recruits, once you got closer to graduation, that final week or whatever, after you finish like your final training or whatever, usually we'll get to go, just because like boot camp's pretty much over at that point. Everybody's kind of locked in, and usually you'll like get to go, but sometimes you don't, and you're just threatened with like the hope that maybe you will, but in reality you're about to get beat for the next 2.5 hours, and you're never going to see Recruit Heaven. But it's fine, because you signed up for it knowing what you were getting into. I think. I definitely did. I knew what I was getting into. And you're being paid while you're there handsomely, really, especially for me as an 18-year-old just coming into it. It was the first time I was earning anything like a consistent income. And they give you all the clothes and they give you that you need, and they give you medical, and they give you a place to stay, and blah, blah, blah. You are cared for, because at that point, the U.S. federal government owns you heart and soul. They have to take care of you because they've stripped you of every other right. So the onus is on them, especially if they want to get their money back out of you, because it takes an investment. I don't know how many, millions or billions of dollars it takes to churn out recruits year after year after year. But, there's some care that's being extended there. And even if during the time you're in boot camp, you never get to take advantage of something like recruit heaven, okay, that's fine. It's temporary. In 3 months' time, you're going to be out of there, and you're going to be able to do more or less whatever you want. You're going to be on your own again, and not living like this a subhuman worm. So it's fine. But people in Opus Dei don't have any of that comfort. They don't have any of that to hang on to, the idea that it's temporary, the idea that you're being paid at the very least in a lot of these situations. They don't even have that. Instead, they just have a whole lot of really nice stuff that nobody really ever uses, and everybody has to work overtime to try to maintain. And at a certain point, it's well, who is this all for? What is the point? It says, according to Alan, Valero's comments refer to how Opus Dei treats assistant numeraries today. Quote, I have a moral responsibility to warn people and highlight religious servitude, she says, adding that Opus Dei cannot sweep their past failings under the rug. This is true. And also, I would add, maybe this refers to how things are now, that people are cared for and remuneration for their work like any citizen, and health benefits and a welcoming environment, and members are in full control of their paychecks and blah, blah, blah. If that is an accurate statement of fact, show me the money. An organization that has been accused of and outright convicted of, in certain countries, has lost the privilege of discretion, in my opinion. When you have clearly demonstrated a track record of not being able to take care of people, abusing people's rights, stripping people of their autonomy, sorry, you don't get the discretion of making your own in-house decisions and having that be a private affair, because all the shit that you are doing has bled in over to my world. You could have all kept it in-house. You could have handled your shit, but you didn't. And I found out about it. And so now we're going to talk about it. And if you expect me or any member of the public to take something like this seriously, Opus Dei, Jack Valero, show me the money. Where is it? Where is the proof? You say things are changing, things are different, prove it. Let's see some paperwork. Let's see some financial records. Prove it, because I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Change for Allen began when her father became aware of a 1981 letter from the late Cardinal Basil Hume of Westminster Archdiocese in Britain, in which Hume challenged Opus Dei's recruitment practices and insisted that no one under age 18 should be allowed to join the group. Hume also insisted that younger members must discuss the matter with their parents or guardians first. Allen was 18 at the time. While Hume had no jurisdiction in Ireland, 2 Irish bishops were contacted by a family member about Allen's situation. One was the now disgraced Bishop Eamon Casey. The other was Bishop Michael Smith of Meath Diocese, where Opus Dei would later establish the Lismullen Center and Cookery School. Casey allegedly did write to Allen, she was told, by a numerary, but the letter was confiscated. Smith visited her at Ballyglunin Park, but nothing came of that interaction, she says. John Paul II, in 1982, promulgated Ut Sit, making Opus Dei a personal prelature, making its leader the pastor to all members and clergy of the organization, no matter where they lived, rather than the typical structure in which a bishop normally has authority over a territory or diocese. So John Paul II has some accountability in the current state of affairs that we are now dealing with. I think. Absolutely. Allen says this structure has allowed Opus Dei to operate outside church structures and authority. The personal prelature has roots in Vatican II's consideration of public clerical association. The prelature is structured in a hierarchical manner with a prelate who is its head and priests and deacons who are secular clergy to assist the prelate. Opus Dei is the only personal prelature in the Catholic Church. Allen believes Pope Francis attempted to address this unique situation with his 2022 apostolic letter, Ad Charisma Tuendum. In it, Francis said the dicastery for clergy, not the congregation for bishops, would govern personal prelatures. The debate over the canonical status of Opus Dei and the emphasis on the juridical standing of its clergy and prelate has left some of the group's lay members, numeraries, supernumeraries, and assistant numeraries grappling with the implications of their own nebulous status. According to Allen, assistant numeraries like her were told they had vocations. Yet she now questions how that was possible for Opus Dei to claim when it wasn't a religious institute or congregation, and it was founded in 1928, long before its personal prelature status. Pope Leo faces a major test over Opus Dei reforms. Yeah. Allen would like to see an inquiry set up to examine the allegations of former assistant numeraries in Ireland, but insists it cannot be a listening commission by Opus Dei. Yeah, the organization with the problems cannot be the organization investigating itself. That cannot be. You cannot expect that to return impartial, accurate results. A church inquiry in Ireland or a church inquiry by the Vatican, starting off with the assistant numeraries, is essential, Allen said. She and another former numerary, Michael Chambers, recently met Jesuit Bishop Alan McGuckian of Down and Connor Diocese in Northern Ireland. The bishop listened intently as she recounted her experiences, she says. And then what? In 2024, Allen approached the Archdiocese of Tuam's Safeguarding Office to lodge a complaint about her time in Opus Dei as a minor at Ballyglunin Park in County Galway. She spoke with Father Francis Mitchell and explained that the group was not a prelature during much of her time in it. At the time, it was under the Archdiocese of Tuam, and therefore the Archdiocese should investigate. Mitchell suggested that she email a written complaint. Write a letter. I found the interaction deeply disappointing, she says, adding that she is considering contacting the National Board for Safeguarding Children in the Catholic Church in Ireland. An NBSCCCI spokesman told NCR Opus Dei's operations in Ireland were audited on safeguarding in November 2015. The spokesperson also said the group, quote, has not received complaints in respect of numerary assistance. After leaving Opus Dei on March 19, 1985, at age 22, Allen subsequently had a successful managerial career in the Irish prison service, but she told NCR her experience with Opus Dei had a huge impact on her life. After she left, members stalked her and her family, she says. There were 20 years of chaos after I left Opus Dei, trying to adjust to the world because I was removed from it for such a formative part of my life, she says. There was a honeymoon period where everything was fantastic, and then after about a year and a half, I started to nosedive. I really couldn't cope with the world. At times, Allen says she was suicidal. There were some very tough and very dark times. Allen considers Opus Dei a cult. Others have made the same accusation. She refers to Stephen Hassan's bite model of authoritarian control and cult's methods to recruit and maintain control over people, including control over behavior, information, thought, and emotional expression. She has sent a copy of her book to Pope Leo, who as a bishop took over the Diocese of Chiclayo in Peru in 2014 from a bishop affiliated with Opus Dei. I am asking him to fight for ex-members and assistant numeraries in particular, she says. She hopes Serve will raise awareness about religious servitude and slavery, and that ex-members of Opus Dei will realize they are not alone and can heal together. I would like to help current members that are unhappy, and I know many are unhappy, realize that there is such a wonderful, fabulous, brilliant world beyond Opus Dei's hell. So Serve, My Lost Years at the Heart of Opus Dei, is an incredible read. Please do get your hands on it if you haven't had a chance to yet. It's really a very moving story, and it perfectly illustrates the problems within Opus Dei. And I think the fact that it's from an English-speaking part of the world is important, because that means, there have been plenty of books that have been previously written by former members of Opus Dei that haven't made it into the English-speaking world because they were written in other languages and never got translated. And so there is a kind of small handful of books that are right now in English about this subject that you can read, and Serve is one of them. And it's an easy book to read. It's written very, very well. The narrative is very engaging. It was hard for me to put it down just because the story really moves along and it takes you with it. So can't recommend it enough. Please support Anne Marie's efforts if you can. I know it would mean a lot to her. And like I said, I have an interview with her that hopefully will be coming out in the not too distant future. I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick. I haven't checked in at all since we've been streaming, and I've seen it kind of going off. Hi, Rogue Cow. The side effects of sexual assault last a lifetime. Yeah, they do. They absolutely do. And they don't just impact like the people that it immediately happens to. It impacts everyone. Rogue Cow says, if you control every aspect of a person's life, that person is a slave. Ohm said I used the Civil Relief Act for sailors. She said I used that resource in the Navy Good program. I know people who have used it as well. Because, you know, shit happens. And lots of people in the military have families. And that can be really, really stressful. Having a family in the military is like trying to have a family on steroids. Because the federal government, the Department of War, now what was the Department of Defense, for all that they say they care about and prioritize families and everything and like the lived experiences of their sailors and soldiers and Marines, and airmen, there's a lot of disparity, or there's not like a homogenous experience across the board. Somebody in the Air Force, for example, is probably going to have a more positive experience, particularly when it comes to like navigating having a family in the military service, than somebody in the Navy or like in the Army, definitely in the Marines. It's not the point. The point is not to have a family when you're in the military. That's not your job. You are a tool of the federal government, and you are there to do a job, and that is it. Michael said, I was in Opus today until my body rebelled. I experienced serious health problems related to the unnatural lifestyle. Before that, I thought I was in the most wonderful place in the world. And you're not alone in that experience either. Like, that's the health side of it, the health decline that people seem to experience that's a pretty common thing for people to report experiencing. Even in Anne Marie's book, she talks about how she got to see firsthand like the physical ailments that people were developing, be it like skin rashes and boils and things. People had to have like special sheets. People had to have like, had to have their stuff washed with like different detergents separate from everybody else to try to manage these symptoms. Everybody, when they would serve meals, Anne Marie mentioned, particularly at one location where she was working, seeing at the table, everybody had little like pill boxes with their medication that they would take. She had to make special meals for people because people had like dietary restrictions, again, because they're trying to manage all of these like physical ailments that are just like developing and coming up. And it's very common. Assistant numeraries deal with it, struggle with it. Numeraries, absolutely. Also, they are not exempt. The stress and the pressure that the organization puts on people is significant, and over time, being under that kind of pressure will manifest physically in your body. It's really interesting. It's interesting the parallels between people coming out of like these high control organizations and the military. I think there are some kind of cultish aspects about the military, at least here in the United States. That's all I can speak to. But in the military, again, like I said, you're being paid, often quite well. and you have access to like healthcare if you need it, and like there are resources you can access, like this Civil Relief Act thing that I mentioned earlier, that just do not exist in Opus Dei. Like, so when you start having those physical ailments, it's not like in the Navy where you can just go run and go see medical or something like that, and they'll, you know, give you a bunch of 800 milligram ibuprofen and tell you to change your socks or whatever. You don't even have that in Opus Dei, really. I mean, sure, they might throw some pills at you, but like the care is not there. And not only is the care not there, but it doesn't really seem like members are able to advocate for themselves. In the military, no one's going to care, in life, no one is going to care about you more than you do, and no one's going to prioritize your health and well-being more than you. That is definitely a hurdle to overcome in the military, because the expectation is that you are always on and always ready to go. But at least you can, if you need to put your foot down and assert yourself and take care of yourself, you can do that. I have not seen stories from Opus Dei representing that's something that can happen there. Wow. Rogue Cow said, I was subjected to slavery conditions as a 24/7 live-in caregiver by Senior and Disabled Services Lane County. OR, you mean Oregon? I lost the right to even leave the house to buy food or go to the ER or attend my vet brother's funeral. I developed major health issues and depression, and no attorney would help me fight back without lots of money up front. Attorney General Rosenbaum stripped me of my right to due process, and local courts helped. I am so sorry. I wish that I could say that I was surprised or shocked, but I'm not. But I am so terribly sorry. And, you know, we're talking about a religious organization in this context, right? Like most of what I discuss is within a religious context, but don't get it twisted. This kind of thing, these abuses and everything, the shisty, backstabbing games, like that exists throughout all strata of society. It really, really does. This isn't unique to Opus Dei or the Catholic Church. These problems, they exist at all levels, and the idea of like people who are there to help being negatively impacted, being abused themselves, yes, that happens. Absolutely. You better believe it. And so don't get tunnel vision and think, oh, if we just get rid of Opus Dei, oh, if we just get rid of Donald Trump, oh, if we just get rid of Javier Milei or whoever, then everything will be fine. That's not true. That's not true. Because these problems have always existed throughout society, and they always will, because for whatever reason, I think they represent the manifestation of some of the worst aspects of humanity. And so the solution is not to think, oh, we'll cut the head off the snake and everything will be fine. No. This requires, from the ground up, reworking our entire society, I think. I think it requires all of us linking arms and finding new solutions that do not require handing over so much of our sovereignty to a privileged few who are the same people who've been in power the entire time, right? The people who are in power today are the people who've always been in power. They seem to always come back up. These families go back decades and decades, if not centuries. And those people are always going to be over there, and all of us are always going to be over here. We don't exist in the same worlds, but they're doing shit that has an impact on us, on our families, on our loved ones, on our society. And like I said, there's more of us than there are of them. They don't exist without us. They don't exist without our participation. Something to think about. All right, I'll come back to the chat later. Let's keep moving along. I'm doing pretty good. So this is about how can canon law reconcile founding charisms and problem founders. So they're talking about spiritual abuse, how to recognize it and how to prevent it. This is from The Pillar. And I think this is good that this conversation is being had. This was published September 26th. It says that these questions are of increasingly pressing importance due to the contemporary church, and in particular to her religious communities, places where, as successive investigations and media reports have made clear, the misuse of authority and manipulation of conscience under spiritual pretexts has undeniably happened. It's not easy or pleasant to acknowledge that such abuse can be found in the very heart of the church, but perhaps the tools for diagnosis and cure can be found in that very same place. Maybe. In a previous column for The Pillar, I argued that religious communities need to take full ownership of the call for ecclesial reforms to combat spiritual abuse. We need this call not first and foremost as an imposition put on us from those on the outside, but instead as a continuation of the call to ongoing reform and renewal which we have received from the church herself. In that column, I pointed out to the proper law of the Institute as an area where reform and renewal can minimize the likelihood of spiritual abuse and help religious to identify it when it does happen. But there is another related aspect of religious life where reform and renewal can have the same effect, one which, like proper law, is discussed in great detail in the post-conciliary documents relating to religious life, the communities found in charism, and its relationship to its founder. What exactly is a founding charism? Even if we are familiar with the word charism as it is applied to individual Catholics, perhaps we or someone we know has discerned a charism such as administration, teaching, or encouragement, for instance. We might not necessarily be familiar with the idea of charisms as applied to entire communities. But if you have ever said, "Better watch what I'm saying, there's a Dominican in the room," in the presence of a member of the order of preachers, asked, "What?" But if you ever said, "Better watch what I'm saying, there's a Dominican in the room," in the presence of a member of the order of preachers, asked an enclosed contemplative to pray for a particularly urgent intention, or felt bad about eating a lavish meal in front of a Franciscan, then you have witnessed to the existence of founding charisms, a particular call to service given by the Holy Spirit to a community held and exercised by them for the good of the church, which makes that community distinct and recognizable within the body of Christ. That was a very poorly written sentence, in my opinion. And it's interesting. I do think what they're saying, their point is well made, that basically if you've ever had like a reaction, if you've ever like not done something, or done something because there was somebody in the room with you, or like that you thought might be watching you, so you kind of felt pressured to do that and to conform, that is true, I think, and interesting. I think that with time, as I've gotten further away from religion, and further away from my experience in the military, which does bear some similarities in certain senses, to this kind of like conformity of behavior and everything, the fear that I feel, or like the hesitation that I feel to say or do something, because someone may perceive it in a certain way, has lessened more and more. And I think that that is because I have become more firm in the things that I believe, and in how I view the world, and how I want to move through the world, and how I want to present myself and everything else. That has lessened. But if you are the kind of person who maybe is not as firmly rooted in those aspects, maybe you're still trying to develop those things or identify those things and figure out what you are going to stand for, and like who you are going to be, how you're going to move through the world, then the impact, the sway that somebody in a position of authority, like either in a religious sense or in the secular world too, the amount of sway that that person could hold over you and your life and your decisions really cannot be overemphasized, because I think it is significant. And I feel like this article is a little bit of a nothing burger. But that doesn't mean that, like, I mean, I guess maybe it indicates at the end of the day that the topic of conversation of spiritual abuse is at least starting to crop up here and there. It's maybe perhaps not being written about in the most eloquent fashion, but it's being written about at all. And the bar is in hell, but we got to start somewhere. All right, this is an interesting one. El Nacional, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent about this because when I saw it come up, I had some thoughts about it, and I still have those thoughts, and I want to talk about it. Okay, yeah. So this article here, I want to make sure I didn't have something else pulled up. No. Okay, so this article here is kind of like a puff piece, honestly, about this guy named Jose Rodriguez Iturbide, who is, I'll just tell you now, let's see. I thought he was affiliated with Opus Dei. Let me make sure I'm not misspeaking. Yep. From a very young age, took the two paths, that of Christian democracy and the social Christian Copiae party, and that of religious practice as a member of Opus Dei. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but there are a few things in here that I thought were really interesting. And he has some comments about politics, specifically, and religion that I think are cool. So this is an article that was written featuring an interview with Iturbide. The author, Hernandez, says at 64, to get rid of a prison threat that the regime presided over by Hugo Chavez orchestrated against him, Jose Rodriguez Iturbide had to go into exile. He landed in Colombia, bringing with him a very long experience as a political leader of Christian democracy. 6 successive periods as a parliamentarian in the disappeared Congress of the Republic of Venezuela, of whose Chamber of Deputies was president, a wide academic experience that includes his studies of law at the University of Zulia and in the Central University of Venezuela, his doctorates in the philosophy of law and canon law, and the University of Navarra, Spain, which the University of Navarra is an Opus Dei university. I know that for sure. I don't know if any of these others are, but the University of Navarra is for sure. Now he lives in Bogota. Whatever. Let me get through here. There was something that he said. He's talking about like his experience fleeing political exile, all that. Here we go. The triangle: religion, political activism, academic life. So it says, rereading his biography and from the conversations we usually have, I conclude that his life has been a triangulation between political activism, academic activity, and his Catholic faith. How do the three passions come together? Faith has always been at the foundation of my proper political life and academic life, but without confusion. Religious faith is a free gift. It is pre-politics and supra-political. It's with us all our lives. For a believer, faith does not imply a confessional policy. Because you cannot ideologize belief, nor dogmatize politics, nor mix the church and temporary flags, faith is the universal and absolute. Politics is marked by circumstances of space and time. When religion is mixed with politics, the absolute is relativized and the relative is absoluted. Every Christian trained knows that in the field of temporals there is a plurality of options with two clear limits: faith in Jesus Christ and the morality of the church. Let me reread that again. When religion is mixed with politics, the absolute is relativized and the relative is absoluted. I don't know if absoluted is a word. Jury's still out on relativized. But I think that this is really interesting because I think that it indicates a practical misunderstanding, a sort of general ignorance, the definition of politics. Politics have become ingrained in literally everything: governance, society, economics, academics, media, entertainment. And it should not necessarily be there, but we have come to just accept that it is going to be there because people have continued to bring it along with them. And why is that? Why is it that politics ends up becoming entangled with religion? Why is it that Iturbide thinks that when religion is mixed with politics, the absolute is relativized and the relative is absoluted? Well, maybe it's because he knows or believes that most people are not going to recall what the definition of politics actually is, and that he can say whatever word salad that he likes. because he concludes with the two clear limits: faith in Jesus Christ and the morality of the church. Politics is defined as the activities associated with the governance of a country or other area, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power. So let's cut out the middle for a second. The activities associated with the debate or conflict among individuals or parties having or hoping to achieve power, and or activities within an organization that are aimed at improving someone's status or position and are typically considered to be devious and divisive. Politicking is devious and divisive because it serves only the individual, ultimately because it is about individuals or parties working in Congress hoping to achieve power, not justice, not governance, not independence, not sovereignty, power. And that are aimed at improving someone's status and position and are typically considered to be devious or divisive. But Iturbe wants us to believe that when religion is mixed with politics, the absolute is relativized and the relative is absoluted, which is a nothing fucking sandwich of a sentence if I have ever read it. But it doesn't matter because it's serving the ultimate end, in this case, which is this faith in Jesus Christ and the morality of the church. But, what does not get said, what is not really addressed, what is never addressed, is how the version of faith in Jesus Christ and the version of morality of the church that people associated with these super conservative organizations like Opus Dei is that it's a very specific flavor. It's a very specific brand of morality, a very specific type of faith. It's not what you will find in sort of your mainstream non-Opus Dei affiliated Catholic parish or church community. And that doesn't really get addressed. But it's significant considering the way that Opus Dei members have sort of utilized their positions and also the network that Opus Dei provides to advance their own agendas or Opus Dei's agenda, because let's not forget, politics are the activities associated with the governance, especially the debate or conflict among individuals or parties hoping to achieve power, typically considered to be devious and divisive. But we're expected to believe that Iturbe can marry the two, religion and politics, and then shoehorn it into governance, and that everything will be hunky-dory and fine. And I do not buy it. He says further down here, I was already a politician. I'm sure you were. I am sure you were. I am sure that Iturbe has always been invested in having or hoping to achieve power through methods that I think most people would consider to be devious or divisive. He says, I already had a politician and had an illusion for academic life when I met Opus Dei. Then I discovered a horizon that God presented to me, and I answered affirmatively. Just as faith is a free gift, so is the vocation. But Opus Dei is not responsible for the professional lives of its faithful, of course. We've got to make sure we get that in here. We've got to make sure Gotta make sure that we get that disclaimer in here, okay? This guy's politically motivated. He's been politically motivated from day one, since before he met Opus Dei. And just so everyone knows, Opus Dei has definitely not capitalized on that in any way, shape, or form. Opus Dei is not responsible for his professional life or what he is doing in his day-to-day. They definitely have no interest in it. It's definitely not something that he's meeting with someone like 2 times a week to discuss. Definitely not. In 65 years, no one has told me in Opus Dei how I should think or what I should do in politics. Sure. I mean, maybe. If you're a true believer, true fanatic, living the life, because you're already doing it. Just keep doing what you're doing. This is great. Anyway, I'm not going to read the rest of this thing. You can go and read it in my source document if you want to. It's really long. That was mainly what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about what he said about religion and politics and governance, because I think it's interesting. I think when somebody says that they've been in politics for years, you should be very suspicious of them. Because again, politicking is not about democracy. It's not about sovereignty. It's about having or acquiring power through divisive, or what was the other word? Devious and divisive methods. Iturbe is out here saying with his full chest that he is devious and divisive, but it's fine because he's devious and divisive for God. Okay. Okay, buddy. Whatever you say. I'm looking at your guys' chat real quick. Michael said, now people tell me I was incredibly stupid for not noticing the obvious red flags. It's easy to say that from the outside, but when you're inside, you have no defense mechanisms left. You wait for something. It cut off the rest of your message, Michael, but I am really sorry if people are calling you stupid for getting sucked into Opus Dei, because the fact of the matter is, intelligence has nothing to do with it. Intelligent, very, very, very intelligent people get hoodwinked and trapped and coerced into things all of the time, every day. It happens all the time. It's not rare. Sadly, it's not unusual. And when you are a true believer, when you believe that you are doing a good and holy thing, red flags just look like flags. Like they don't look like red flags when you are in it and trying to live it, and you are trying to believe everything because it's coming from a good altruistic place, which in my opinion the vast majority of former members that I have met have been very altruistic people with a sense of duty and a sense of care and wanting to live out a good and holy life. Like, these are all factors that are present in pretty much every single former member that I've talked to, and that gets preyed upon by Opus Dei, or pick a religious or civil organization. But you're not stupid for having fallen for it. You're not stupid at all. It's a system that is designed to manipulate people. And it worked. And that's not your fault at all. I'm just glad that you can see it for what it is now. And that's really all that you can all that you can really do. You just have to try to carry it forward and keep that awareness. But don't punish yourself for not being able to see something like that. You don't know what you don't know. Brainwashing and messaging and everything really does work. It absolutely does work. And it's a very complex conversation to have about, especially for people who have been in organizations like this, who not only suffered, but perhaps even reinforced that suffering on other people. Maybe you have people in Opus Dei who were directors or within the like hierarchy leadership of Opus Dei who have now left and must grapple not only with their own, having to come to terms with what happened to them, but also having to come to terms with what they did to other people under the guise of, following a vocation. And that is a very complex bag to have to unpack. But I want to say that I do not judge anybody who was in that environment and participated in and even reinforced the systems. I don't judge you for that. As long as you're somebody who is on the outside now, or even you could still be on the inside, as long as you are working to be a positive change, you are working to either no longer be a part of those systems, or you're working to actively change those systems, or whatever. Once you have that awareness, once you know better, you do better, right? But I don't judge you for past behaviors and past experiences. You don't know what you don't know. And I do believe in things like forgiveness and rehabilitation, particularly when you're talking about people coming out of exploitative systems like this. I'm not interested in playing a blame game when there is active and sincere contrition and desire for change being voiced. That's why I'm not coming after the Legion of Christ with all guns blazing, because I think that they are starting to take some steps. Now I'm going to continue to talk about it and highlight it and keep an eye on it, because when someone says they're going to do something, particularly when it's a powerful organization, you need to hold their feet to the fire and expect that they will do it. But when active change is attempting to be made, when sorrow and remorse are being expressed, I think you should acknowledge those things and give the grace that is due, while also continuing to hold the correct parties responsible for what has happened. You have to, it's multiple different things that kind of need to happen and to kind of be held within the same sphere. It's a very complex thing. But just know, I do not judge somebody for coming through this and realizing that they were a part of something terrible, or that they even helped perpetuate something terrible. I'm not going to pile on that when somebody is trying to work through that realization on their own. That's not my job. Michael said, I knew many people like Iturbe. They uttered beautiful slogans praising Opus Dei. When I check where they are after many years, most often they are no longer members of the organization. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because maybe this is speculation on my part. I'm sure there are many different reasons why people leave, but a part of it I have to think is because there comes a point where the resources that you have that can be harvested have been tapped completely. You what you have to offer has been thoroughly exhausted, whether that's financial assistance, or you actually providing labor to the organization, or whatever. There reaches the point where the organization is no longer going to get a return on having you there. And so for a lot of people, I think it reaches a point of critical mass where they have nowhere to go. They can't continue in the organization because the organization doesn't really want them anymore. And they have nothing more to offer. And I think that puts people in very difficult situations, because now you have an individual who's maybe spent 30, 40, 50 years in an organization and they have nothing. If you're talking about somebody who has been in the old world of Opus Dei, allegedly things are changing now, let's see the proof. But if you're talking about somebody who left kind of from the old Opus Dei, having come up through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s and everything, they're not going to have like social security. I don't think Opus Dei provides like a stipend or anything to retired members. I have heard some things about there being like homes and places where elderly members can go and live, but I don't know how common that is. I don't know how standard that is. I don't really ever see like care of the elderly being something that Opus Dei writes about very often. Like I don't see those articles coming across my desk from opusdei.org. Maybe they are, but I'm not seeing them. So yeah, people reach a point where it's like there's nothing for them, nothing left for them, so they have to leave, and there's nothing for them on the outside. And I think it creates a really tragic situation. Yeah, Rogue Cow said, "Your kindness and goodness were exploited, Michael, and that's on Opus Dei. They've been practicing manipulation for thousands of years. Well, hundreds, or almost 100 anyway. The organization's been around since the 1920s, so they've definitely been practicing the art and had plenty of inspiration to draw from as well. So, yeah, it's a system." All right, let's take a look at this next article. This is from Alatia, which is like an Opus Dei publication, and I just thought this was so funny and just stereotypical Opus Dei. The headline says, "Tired teachers take inspiration from the wonderful Blessed Alvaro." They're talking about Alvaro del Portillo, who was Jose Maria Escriva's like right-hand man when he was still alive, and then when Escriva died, he became the new prelate. And of course, Escriva has been canonized, and Alvaro has been beatified, and that's definitely a big deal that they continue to emphasize anytime there's an opportunity. But this is supposed to be like words of uplifting, like motivation or whatever for teachers. It says, if you're already feeling weary in the classroom, here's how Blessed Alvaro del Portillo can boost your teaching practice, right? So I'm thinking, just getting into this article, that I'm going to hear some type of like insight, advice, something from this now dead prelate of Opus Dei about teaching. And I'm thinking to myself, this is interesting because I didn't know that Portillo had anything to do with teaching or had a background in teaching or anything. So I was kind of curious to see what he had to say. And there's two block quotes in here that they then build everything around. Two very short quotes. The first is, welcoming towards everyone and always seeking in others what is positive, what united, what is constructive. That's something that apparently, Pope Francis wrote about Alvaro, describing him as being welcoming towards everyone and always seeking in others what was positive, what united, and what was constructive. And then under lessons in kindness and unity, say one other element of Blessed Alvaro stands out. The founder of Opus Dei, Jose Maria Escriva, described him as always having a smile. There have been many occasions, humanly speaking, for getting angry, for becoming irritated, or for being disloyal, but he always had a smile and an incomparable fidelity. So at this point, I'm just confused because I thought we were going to read an article talking about how to like avoid burnout in the classroom. But really, it's actually just like there's some teaching stuff thrown in here, but it's not really anything substantial. And it doesn't even have anything specifically said by Portillo. It's quotes by other people talking about him. Here, I mean, like, Escriva apparently said that he was like so loyal and human and had such great fidelity. And then Pope Francis said that he was welcoming towards everyone. Okay, that's great, but like that doesn't really say, that's nothing substantial about like, okay, so what are you going to do? So as you step into class on Monday, remember Alvaro's way. Find the positive in each student, seek what unites, and construct something greater together. Thank God for the privilege of shaping young lives, ask forgiveness for when things go wrong, and pray for the help to carry on with renewed strength. So basically their advice is, are you feeling burned out in the classroom? Just try harder. You must not be trying hard enough. That's why you're so tired. And I think that that's pretty stereotypical par for course language that you would expect to see from Opus Dei. And I thought that that was really funny. The article has nothing in there helpful for teachers about how to like improve things in the classroom. But they had some quotes from some people who really liked Portillo. And I just thought that was really funny. So this is something that came up for me. And I think I had some other articles. Let me scan through here real quick that I had pulled up kind of looking at some different things. Yes. Because this article came up and I was like, I could go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with this. This might be kind of interesting. So, make sure I'm starting in the right place. We're going to learn some new things here. So the first thing that I saw came from this Magyar career page. I'm not exactly sure. Let me see. I'm not sure what language this was originally in. I'm trying to see. The website URL gives me a clue. Oh, HU. So this is from Hungary. And it's ostensibly translated from Hungarian to English. Headline says, Opus Dei community launches a course for young couples in Budapest. So this is upcoming. Well, now it's past, but there's still some that are ahead. They had one October 4th. They're going to have another one November 22nd, January 17th, February 21st, March 21st. And it's a course for young couples and families in marital love and the topics of child rearing. The course is beyond the processing of important issues of marriage, sharing experiences, and it's also supposed to give couples the opportunity to form meaningful friendships, and they specifically address newlyweds in English, okay? So this is being promoted by this organization here, this CSAF forum, and this IFFD, which is the International Federation for Family Development. The IFFD is 100% Opus Dei. And let's see what we can learn about this CSAF is what it looks like it is. It's a Hungarian word. The CSAF forum is just what I'm gonna call it. You translate this page on their about. This is like the CSAF's website, and if you go to their like goals about page, whatever, this is what it says. The Family Training Forum Association was founded by parents practicing the Family Training Forum with the aim of creating a forum that seeks practical and ambitious answers to questions and life situations in the field of conjugal love, parental profession, and the upbringing of children of different ages. Conjugal love, they're talking about sex. The target groups of the association are young adults, young people who are starting a career or a relationship, that are developing a relationship and starting independent life, who strive to control their lives consciously and to continuously shape their personalities. So you scroll down here to their origins. It says the Family Training Forum, CSAF, as a non-profit association, is a Hungarian partner organization of the International Federation for Family Development, which was founded in 1978. The main profile of the IFFD is the strengthening of families, the training of parents, and the development of the willingness of family members to cooperate. That sounds creepy. What does that mean? So the IFFD's main goal is strengthening families. Okay, that sounds fine. The training of parents, all right. And the development of the willingness of family members to cooperate, which sounds like coded for like some type of strong arming techniques, some parental strong arming techniques, but what do I know? IFFD's partner organizations in different countries are present in all areas of public life where the right of the institution of marriage and the role of parents in raising children must be represented and may be represented. So I don't think they say anything on this page about Opus Dei. They do not. But the fact that they're associated with IFFD was a bit of a red flag for me. So let's go to the next page that I have pulled up here. So this, let's see. Go to the next one. Yeah, here we go. IFFD. Promoting the importance of family life. You go IFFD.org, about us. This is what it says. The International Federation for Family Development, IFFD, is an independent, nonprofit international organization dedicated to promoting the importance of family life, family enrichment. So they got a presence in 68 countries on 5 continents. With a wide network of committed volunteers, provide parenting support, and are the largest international civil society organization recognized by the United Nations, focused on strengthening family relationships. So it began in the late 1960s with the development of parenting support programs using the case study method. So this organization has been around for quite some time. And here they have a little ticker down at the bottom, 68 countries, 5 continents, 1,250 plus moderators, and over 7,000 volunteers. Now, keeping all of that in mind, let's go and look now at this article, which was published on opusday.org in 2024. Let me move this over so we can read it. It says, Pause, a digital platform for families. Stop and think about your family is the tagline for a new digital platform from IFFD, International Federation for Family Development, with content on education and family life. Javier Relatz, an IFFD advisor and one of the driving forces behind the project, explains that the platform is meant to be an international reference for issues related to family and education, bringing together the meaningful content and high audiovisual quality. So this is a media outreach venture, okay, that the IFFD is undertaking. They've already launched the first module, which is on mental health and addictions and getting your children to listen about authority in the family. Quote, don't miss your first steps on early childhood and put stress on pause on reducing tension at home. That's coming soon. But they've already launched the first module on mental health and addiction, which I think is really interesting. And they've got all these different experts, personal testimonies from mothers, fathers, young people. It says that IFFD is an international NGO that provides formation and support. Of course, what you're not going to see, it says it serves numerous institutions, including family, work-related, and religious organizations, and for years, many initiatives were supported by faithful and friends of the prelature have relied on its experience and knowledge to develop family guidance courses. So I am not 100% sure that IFFD is a purely through-and-through Opus Dei thing, but it is very clear that it is aligned with Opus Dei at the very least, and I would be shocked if it had not been founded by somebody who was in Opus Dei. Now, I think what I had done is I had basically Googled like IFFD plus Opus Dei or CSAF plus Opus Dei or whatever, and I found some other like organizations that are affiliated either with CSAF or mostly IFFD, this International Federation of whatever. And these are just a couple of examples. And this just goes to show, I think, you have like these massive organizations. You could think of them, this isn't an exactly correct term, but you could think of them as like these umbrella organizations, these umbrella foundations, which that's a term that more applies to like charitable giving and that kind of thing. Like there's an Opus Dei umbrella foundation that's out of Northern Europe somewhere called Limmat Stiftung. And Limmat Stiftung is this huge umbrella organization that makes it possible for philanthropists to donate money without having to like manage the like back end aspect of having like a nonprofit or a charitable organization or something like that. They can instead donate money through this umbrella foundation, this Limmat Stiftung, and then their funding will get funneled into various outlets that are predominantly, from what I have seen, at least in Limmat Stiftung's case, in like education specifically education for women and children. And Limmat Stiftung, like I said, is Opus Dei. And it has all of these other smaller organizations connected to it, kind of like coming off of it like like little threads, or like you can kind of see like a web sort of thing starting to develop with all these different organizations that are all over the world. It's not just the IFFD or the CSAF. There's also this Tertio Millanio Center, which is Latin, and it's currently the main project for this organization, where they planned to become the center of human and chastity-oriented education and character shaping at the dawn of the 21st century. The center this is all speaking in future tense, so I don't know if this doesn't exist yet or what, but it says the center will provide a space where young Hungarians and families can grow and learn mentally and spiritually. Hungarian, not Latin. I misspoke. So this is I misspoke. Tertio Millanio. I saw the name and I was like, oh, that sounds Spanish. It must be like in Latin America or in Spain. No, it's in Hungary. But the center is for young Hungarians and families to grow and learn mentally and spiritually in a 21st century environment, whatever that means. The spiritual trainings available to students are provided by Opus Dei, the personal prelature of the Catholic Church. So this Tertio Millanio Center is going to be an Opus Dei center. And then what else did I find? There were a couple of other things too. This IFFD, we read this pause article from opusdei.org talking about IFFD. There's this other one. This is PARF preschools in, what's the URL? PH, so I think the Philippines, PARF, which is interesting because it sounds very similar to PAR-ED, which is another acronym for a grouping of Opus Dei schools in like Australia, New South Wales. It's called PAR-ED, and this is called PARF, which I think is really interesting. And so here on their page, it says, we are a community of schools committed to support parents who are the primary educators of their children by providing personal, integral education in pursuit of academic excellence and a life of virtue. And what I have noticed that I think is really interesting, anytime you have these organizations or these study centers or whatever that are like trying to reach young people or families with young people, they always have to throw in this line about how they're committed to supporting parents because they believe that parents are the primary educators of their children. Very non-threatening language, right? If you're a parent who's considering sending your child to something like this, then, you know, maybe seeing something like that would assuage any concerns that you might have. Maybe a friend of yours who knows about Opus Dei was like, I wouldn't suggest the PARF organization because I think they're affiliated with Opus Dei. And then the parents come on here and they're like, but look, they're supporting parents and they do recognize that we are the primary educators of our children, and that's a big deal, which is a very popular or very a pressing concern, I should say, for many parents who are trying to educate their children in a manner that is like counterculture. And that's the kind of language, I mean, I've heard this kind of language in other places too. I was homeschooled my entire K through 12 academic experience, and my family would go to homeschooling retreats and things like that, and like I saw this kind of language, but it's very, in my adult life I pretty much exclusively encounter it within like a context of Opus Dei, which I think is interesting. So that whole line about being committed to supporting parents who are the primary educators of their children, that's like one of those like Opus Dei dog whistles almost, and as soon as I hear that, I'm like, I know what we're dealing with here. And it seldom am I wrong. So here's another one. This is Walnut Grove. I'm just showing you guys these things. I just found them and I was like, look at how many organizations there are. Is this a US based thing? Let me see. Yes, this is in California. This Walnut Grove. And it says, the Family Enrichment of Los Angeles is a non-organization affiliated to the International Family Development, IFFD. So IFFD is a through line throughout all of these other little organizations and centers and things that I'm showing you. IFFD is a non-governmental independent federation founded more than, it's cutting the page off. Let me see if I can expand this and it'll bring my text back. Not really. That's weird. Family enrichment courses of IFFD with a methodology based on the case study method are in more than 60 countries, 5 continents, blah blah blah. So this is like they have landed on US soil. And actually, I kind of was initially alerted about IFFD after I found out about some Opus Dei activities in California, particularly in like the Napa Valley, like wine country region of California, where there's a lot of money and a lot of wealth and influence because people from like Silicon Valley have moved up there and brought all of their wealth and connections with them. And this IFFD, this Family Enrichment of Los Angeles and IFFD are both present over there and in these communities and have been for at least 8 years, I would say, minimum, if not longer. Let's see, I think I got one more here that I wanted to. Did I go back to that other one? This other weird little organization? Oh yeah, Tertio Millennio. So there's a web of Opus Dei organizations, Opus Dei nonprofits, organizations affiliated with Opus Dei in some way. There's a web. There's so many. And I just kind of wanted to show you guys some of these so that maybe if you hear a funky name in the future, you can kind of like look at it and you'll know kind of what to keep an eye out for. This IFFD, I would like to do more research into it, and I just have not had the chance yet. But what little bit of reading I have done on it, it's a very interesting situation. All right, I'm gonna close some of these down. I think we have one article left, guys. We are finally through. All right, so, I don't know if I may have pulled this up for my research purposes. I think I did. I put up a highlight, or I clipped my segment from the part, I think part 1 or part 2, where I talked about my opinion of Pope Leo. And one of the things that has colored my perception significantly has been some of the things that he's been doing, some of the people he's been meeting with, like this Cardinal Cipriani, who is just not a good dude. Really, he's just not a good dude. But he doesn't have time. Pope Leo has not met with the victims of Opus Dei, despite the fact that they've been trying. You can go and watch that whole blurb if you want to. But yeah, I think that concludes it. That is everything. We finally got through. I'm so excited. There were just so many important articles and headlines, and I wanted to read them all. I didn't want to like skip out on something. So check your guys' chat. Michael says, lately I've been reading everything about harmful groups, sex, religious, business, etc. A lot of this has emerged in Poland in recent uncertain times. Poland, Poland and Hungary and Scandinavia, like the northern kind of Europe region. There are definitely some things happening there that I think are could be the precursor to more significant historical events later on. And it's kind of hard to like get a sense of what's going on because I'm American. I don't speak the languages. I see the articles and I read the articles that come up that like I can interpret and understand, but it's a very different culture. So there are definitely things over there that I take for granted or just am not aware of. But what I am absolutely aware of is that there is stuff happening, the Opus Dei is in these countries, and it seems to be putting quite a bit of effort in those parts of the world as well. Rogue Cow said Mormons are active in the Philippines, and I've heard desert Mormons work with Opus Dei groups. They all have in common a love of free labor. Yeah, that is true. I've been watching a lot of Alyssa Grenfell's content recently. She is an ex-Mormon who has a very successful YouTube channel now where she has gone in at length about her experience not only being raised Mormon, but also her experience being a woman in the Mormon church and what was, contributing to her decision to eventually leave, blah, blah, blah. If you've never checked out any of her content, I highly recommend it. And honestly, even though she grew up Mormon and I grew up Catholic, there are similarities. There are similarities. I think when you get into the world of conservative religion specifically, there are a lot of similarities. And actually learning about Mormonism and the history of the church and about Joseph Smith and everything, really honestly helped me in my own deconstruction journey, in my own journey of trying to figure out for myself what I actually believed and what I wanted to stand behind. For whatever reason, hearing someone question and critique and analyze their own experience in a religion helped me like frame my own and helped me kind of process some of my own experiences. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about sharing about these kinds of experiences, is that while there are certain things that are very specific to each circumstance and situation, there are similarities across the board that I think can really help unite us in working towards creating a better, more fair world where women and children and minorities are not actively discriminated against and harmed. I would like to believe that that is possible. Michael asks, are Mormons considered a sect in your country? I sometimes meet them on the streets in big cities dressed in suits and offering free language courses. They're generally friendly. I think it depends on who you talk to. I definitely think there are people who perceive the LDS church or Mormonism or whatever as very sect-like. I definitely do. But I don't know how common that perception is. Like, I don't know if you walked up to somebody, out in town and ask them what their perception of Mormonism is. I mean, probably they would have a pretty good perception. I feel like the perception of Mormons in the United States is pretty positive, or at least things may be changing now a bit. There may be some nuance being added to the conversation because we've had like The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which is a reality TV show that came out and really like laid bare the lived experiences of Mormons modern day. And then also you have like YouTubers like Alyssa and others who are speaking out about their experiences. So like things may be changing a bit now, but generally speaking, I think Mormons are perceived very positively. They're very good at presenting themselves well. They tend to have very like large and attractive families. They're big on appearances. That's something that I have learned from watching Alyssa's content. And they're big on appearances on like the curbside appeal of it all. Having like a friendly, smiling, outgoing, pleasant countenance is like definitely a part of the branding image and everything. And I have friends who grew up Mormon as well, and I've talked to them a little bit about their experiences. And yeah, I don't know. From my experience, the vast majority of Mormons that I have met have been very friendly, very kind. I think they are generally very well-intentioned people for the most part, despite what they may be implicitly condoning via their participation in the religion and everything. Yeah, I think they're perceived pretty positively, honestly. I think Jehovah's Witness honestly are perceived a bit poorer than Mormons are. Just because, look at her, she's got to stretch all the way off the bed, all the way down. Just because at least in the area that I grew up, for whatever reason, we had a number of Jehovah's Witness, and like they would show up knocking on your door and stuff, and generally people were not real happy to see them, did not speak very positively of the Jehovah's Witness in like my area. I grew up in the Midwest. So I think it depends on where you go. I think it depends on where you ask. I will say I've been to Salt Lake City and Provo, Utah, and Utah in general, it's beautiful. But it is one of the weirdest states I have ever been to. Like, the vibes are just kind of off. There's something, especially Salt Lake City, which is, kind of the Mormon Mecca. It's really it's got a weird energy. It's hard to describe, honestly, if you've never been there. But like, their towns are very clean, very orderly, very, very easy to navigate. Everyone's very friendly, but like, there's sort of this undercurrent of something that's very difficult to put your finger on. And something else that I noticed when we were there, because we were there during a school year, we were in March or something like that. So there were a lot of students at BYU and around town and everything. Charlie, you can't be there. You're going to knock my camera over. Good girl. Thank you. So there were students and stuff walking around town, and it's like the horniest town in the world, honestly. Like, it was like multiple people as we're like driving down the street trying to like go get ice cream or something. I'm like seeing people like arm in arm, just like wrapped up, like all over each other, or like making out in cars as we're like sitting at red lights, to a degree that I have just never seen before. So they have a very interesting culture, a very interesting subculture. And I think in Utah, because Utah is kind of like their domain, it's very, very evident. And I don't know how non-Mormon Utahns perceive Mormons. But I would have to imagine that by and large, it's probably pretty positive, because again, they are all about the curbside appeal and about appealing to your sensibilities and everything, and looking very friendly and welcoming and warm. So yeah, that's my 10 cents. Hi, Wave of Mutilation. Wonderful to see you in here. So Rogue Cow says, rumor is Mormon church could fall apart as elder died recently, but this could lead to violence. It's feared. Yeah, he did pass away. Although from what I understand, it should be like a pretty smooth and simple transition to the next guy, because like the way that the Mormon church does it is that it's based on seniority. And so like their version of the Pope, which they call a prophet, is just the oldest, it seems to be the oldest male member of their little like council or whatever it's called. And so the oldest guy, he passed away here recently, and so the next oldest guy is who is supposed to step in. Yeah, they're kind of going through what the Catholic Church went through back in April and May. So it's kind of interesting to see. I do know the Mormon church, I think they're losing control of the narrative for the first time, really, since it's, 200 years of existence or whatever. It's not a very old religion. I think it was founded in like the 1800s in the United States. They're losing the ability to keep control of the narrative because former members are leaving and speaking out and sharing things like, what goes on inside the temple during these like super secret ceremonies that you have to like get special permission from the Mormon church to attend, the kinds of like promises and prayers that people are being required to pray, the mental impact of all of that stuff on a person's psyche. All of that stuff is becoming more and more well known and well recognized, and I think the Mormon church will be obliged to respond to that in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just what they've been doing up to now, which is kind of just subtly letting previous messaging and rhetoric kind of fall away and let like more mainstream modern ideas kind of take their place. I don't know. And I'm not Mormon, so I don't really follow it. I don't know as much as a lot of other people do. Like I said, I do recommend Alyssa Grunfell's YouTube channel, just because I think listening to someone else speak about their experiences leaving high control religion and how they have like found meaning in their life and everything can be really, really helpful. It's been helpful for me. So If you're looking for a new YouTuber and you haven't watched her, Alyssa Grenfell, you might like her. And then another one that I like is Genetically Modified Skeptic. He was raised evangelical Christian, I believe, and ended up leaving as an adult. And now he is an atheist. But I enjoy watching his content because he engages with church topics from a very, or like religious topics, biblical topics, from a very like grounded and educated perspective. He incorporates scholarship and academic rigor into it, which I really appreciate. And I've learned a lot from just about like the Bible, for example, from watching his content. So Genetically Modified Skeptic is another good one. Rogue Cow said, my Mormon boss was better than the Democratic governor of Oregon and treating me better as a caregiver, but not by much. Yeah, that's something interesting that Alyssa has discussed on her channel, is how if somebody is living in Utah and they are Mormon and they decide to leave, it can be like personally devastating, because if you live in a Mormon community, everyone on both sides of your family are Mormon, and then you decide to leave, you're going to lose. You stand to lose quite a bit. Add to that, a lot of the time, these people, not only are their families Mormon, their employers are Mormon, the teachers at their children's schools are Mormon. Like, it's Mormon through and through. And so if you leave, you have nowhere to go, and you stand to be ostracized from your community because of your desire to break with the social norm. It's very real. It's very real. Rogue Cow said, Charles Johnson on Substack writes extensively about Mormons and our politics. He's from legacy Mormon family way back, but not Mormon. Cool. I'll have to check him out. I created a Substack myself called Beck Griffin and the Deep Dive Project back over the earlier part of the summer, and I've been slowly writing things. It's been a little bit slower because I've had a lot of work on like this side of the Deep Dive Project, so I haven't been able to write as much, but I was going to say something and then I lost my train of thought. Oh, Substack. I've been writing on there, and I've found some great writers that I've really been enjoying. Gareth Gore's a great one to subscribe to, especially if you are following the Opus Dei side of things, because he's pretty invested in that. And then I've also just found other writers on there, like environmental science people and people from like the human rights side of things, other independent journalists. It's pretty cool, and it's a great way to support the continuation of journalism, especially as like the media landscape is really shifting and morphing and changing. It's a really good way to support independent creators, because you can be like a free subscriber, which helps, of course, or you can be a paid subscriber. So it's kind of giving creators and independent journalists another option for supporting themselves and for getting information out there, which I think is cool. Yeah, and by and large, the experiences that I've had on Substack so far has been pretty good. I've had lots of like different kinds of blogs and things over the years. I've always been a writer at heart, and I have used a lot of different types of, like, I've used like Blogger, WordPress, whatever. This is my first time using Substack, and I like it. It's simpler, it's cleaner, it has fewer bells and whistles, honestly, than like Blogger or WordPress does. And I think it works really well for what it is. So I've been enjoying it. And so yeah, if you want to check out Beck Griffin and the Deep Dive Project, you can. You can become a free subscriber, and anytime I write a new article, the article is free for anyone to read for the first week that it is up, and then after that, it does go behind a paywall. So if you wanted to read past articles, you would have to either use your 1 or 2 free unlocks that you automatically get by being on Substack, or you'd have to become a paid supporter. But you don't have to do that. If you just want to see what comes out in the future, you can be a free subscriber. It still helps me out a ton, and then you'll be able to read stuff, because I do keep it open for like the first week. But all right, guys, I think that is where I'm going to conclude things for now. My family members are starting to get a little anxious. They probably want to go for a walk. So I need to wrap this up and go outside with them. But thank you so much for being here with me for this stream. This was great. I'm so happy that I was able to wrap up the September newsroom. It took some different parts to do it, but it's okay. We got through it. And hopefully there was some value that you guys took from this. Again, if you want to look through any of the articles on your own time or share any of them with anyone, you can find them linked in the source document down below. Details to connect with me on social media also linked down below. If you or someone that you know is in need of mental health support, I also have some mental health resources down below, and I hope that you take advantage of those. And yeah, I think that's where I'm gonna leave it for now. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you for being in the chat and talking with me. I sincerely appreciate it. I should have another video for you guys very, very soon. And in the meantime, just remember, nolite te bastardes carborundorum. Do not let the bastards drag you down.